Good morning, all. It looks like we have a quorum here, and I believe we're all ready to get started. It's 10:06, so if I could have Ms. Chiquetti please call the roll.
Chairman Vasquez,
Present?
Vice Chair Lieber.
Here.
Member Gaines.
Here.
Member Schaefer.
Here.
Deputy Controller Emron.
Present.
So we do have a full body here. With that, let me call the meeting to order, and we will start with our Pledge of Allegiance. If I can get everybody to please stand, those that can. Put your right hand over your heart.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
With that, Ms. Chiquetti, if you would please call our first item of business.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Our first order of business is an informational announcement. First, I'd like to remind the audience to silence your cell phones and any other wireless devices. Public comment is taken on each agenda item. The public will be invited to comment during the matters before the board. If there are any members of the public wishing to speak before the board on any agenda item in person, we ask that you complete and submit to the Sergeant of Arms a public comment appearance sheet located at the entrance of the auditorium. If you wish to speak before the board by telephone, please dial the phone number and access code provided on our public agenda notice and follow the instruction of the AT&T moderator. If you intend to make a public comment today using the AT&T moderator, we recommend dialing into the meeting on the teleconference line prior to the beginning of the agenda item you wish to make a comment. We recommend this as the audio broadcast on our website experiences a 1 to 3 minute delay between the live stream and the live event. When giving a public comment, please limit your remarks to 3 minutes. The order that the board identifies public comments at the conclusion of each agenda item is as follows. I will first identify any public comment requests that have been received by the board proceeding staff in the auditorium. Then I will identify any public comments with the AT&T moderator. And lastly, we will read into the record any public comments received in writing in advance of today's meeting. This concludes the informational announcement. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, members, I'd like to open up our meeting today in recognition of Black History Month, which would acknowledge the Black Americans' important role in our shared history and their accomplishments and contributions in every area of our endeavors. This month, we celebrate ongoing efforts of Black Americans who have contributing to more fair and inclusive society that realizes its full promise for all. And I know we had some opening remarks on it at our last meeting, but I just wanted to, since we're coming to the end of Black History Month in February, I wanted to also just acknowledge that and bring it to everybody's attention, especially for the viewing audience. And with that, let me open it up and see. I think there is some comments from some of our members. We have our Deputy Controller.
Thank you, Chairman, for recognizing Black History Month. Throughout the month of February, millions of Californians have the opportunity to gather and celebrate Black History Month. The rich history of Black Americans extends far beyond the traditional month of February. Year-round, we acknowledge and celebrate the contributions of the African American culture and traditions, which helps paint a fuller picture of the history of our nation. This year's theme, Black Resistance, highlights the profound legacy of many African American heroes who rose up against discrimination, violence, and oppression. We honor their sacrifice, bravery, and strength to overcome many obstacles. However, the work for a more equal and just society is not done. The pursuit for equal opportunity, fair housing, equitable education, impartial mortgage lending, greater political representation, and so much more is ever present. The will and determination of Black Americans to continue to make a way not only for themselves, but also for the millions of women, refugees, immigrants, and other historically marginalized communities to believe in the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, ideals that remain at the core of American democracy. With the tragic death of Tyree Nichols still heavy in our hearts and minds, there remains plenty of work to continue to addressing systematic racism head-on and protecting the rights and safety of Black Americans. I stand with the Comptroller in continuing to fight to break down the barriers to equality, equity, and justice for all. In the midst of struggle, there lies an opportunity to create the type of impactful and positive change that will last forever. This year, on what would have been Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s 94th birthday, I end with his infamous quote, "Change does not roll in on the wheels of inevitability, but comes through continuous struggle." Thank you.
Thank you for those opening remarks. Is there any other member that wants to chime in? Seeing and hearing. Oh, yes. Ms. Liebert, Member Liebert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I very much appreciate the remarks that have been made. I think that our U.S. history would not be the same without recognizing our Black history as an essential part of it. And it's a history that is still being written. And there are so many people who make up the promise of California who are a part of writing that history. And so I look forward to their contributions ongoing as part of our state.
Thank you, Vice Chair Lieber. And you're so correct and so on point, because now I believe it is last session, the legislator finally is going to require ethnic studies in our schools, in our public schools. So like you mentioned, I mean, I'm learning so much more about Black history that was never taught when I was going to school. And we're learning more and more, not only about their contributions, but how it impacted our lives and our own history. So looking forward to that. Yes, Member Schaefer.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, history's being made. Recently, lots of Black progress. We've had our first Black woman ever appointed to the Supreme Court of the United States, who's doing a fine job. We have our governor vowing to appoint a Black woman to the U.S. Senate if a vacancy should come up. I'm an ex-prosecuting attorney, and I'm always in support of whatever the police are doing, but I frankly am pleased to see rogue policemen being prosecuted and held accountable for misconduct. I think that elevates the quality of all law enforcement. And I was surprised to find that we still had a lot of racism in our country until I saw the movie The Green Book, which came out about 1918, about the difficulty that Black people had staying in hotels and motels around the country. That was part of our life in the 1960s. And I'm very proud to say that when I was in the hotel business, Chamber of Commerce told me they had 20 Black musicians coming to Catalina Island, and none of the hotels there, owned by a certain one owner, had any rooms to rent at all. And I gave them 20 rooms at rack rates of $20, $30 and made them very happy. And I found out it was Count Basie and his orchestra that were coming to town. So I'm very proud to have been part of participating in the wonderful progress being made back then and today. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, I see no other hands. Ms. Cicchetti, if you would please call our first item.
Okay, good morning. First item on our agenda is item C, public hearing. Item C1, property taxes, state assessees presentations on capitalization rates and other factors affecting value. C1A, state assessees and/or representatives presentations on capitalization rates and other factors and procedures affecting fiscal year 2023-24 property values of California public utilities, railroads, and pipelines. This matter will be introduced by Mr. McCool.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Vasquez and honorable members of the board. My name is Jack McCool, Chief of the State Assessed Properties Division. I am here to introduce the state assessees' presentations on capitalization rates and other factors affecting value. Under Property Tax Rule 903, the board provides state assessees with the opportunity to make public informational presentations regarding the valuation of their unitary property. These presentations are informational and do not require any board action. I am not aware of any state assessees that are planning on making a presentation today. However, I will note that the State Assessed Properties Division staff have met with state assessees already this year to discuss matters relating to the upcoming valuation season, and we have additional meetings scheduled this month. We will also continue to make ourselves available to any state assessee that would like to meet with us. That concludes my presentation for this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCool. Seeing no hands. Mr. Chetty, do we have any written comments?
We have no written comments, and no one has said that they wanted to make a presentation within the auditorium. Let me go out to the AT&T moderator.
Thank you.
AT&T moderator, please let us know if there's anyone on the line who'd like to make a public comment on this item.
Ladies and gentlemen on the phones, to make a comment on this item, please press 1 then 0 on your phone's keypad at this time. An operator will gather your name and place you in queue and wait for your name to be called to give you your comment. Once again, to queue up for comments, press 1-0, please. Madam Chair, we have no commenters queuing up.
Thank you. Members, unless I see no questions or comments, and like Mr. McCool mentioned, no action is required in motion. So with that, we will move on. Ms. Cicchetti, if you please call the next item.
The next item is C1B, private railroad car assessees and other representatives' presentations on factors and procedures affecting fiscal year 2023-24 taxable values of private railroad cars. This item will be introduced by Mr. McCool.
Thank you. Chair Vasquez and honorable members of the board, today's agenda also provides private railroad car taxpayers an opportunity to make public presentations to the board on factors affecting the taxable values of private railroad cars. I am not aware of any private railroad car assessees that are making presentations today. However, their annual property statements are due on April 30th, and staff will continue to make themselves available should any assessees wish to discuss any matters. Thank you.
I'd like to.
Thank you, Mr. McCool. It looks like we have a couple hands here, so let me start with Member Gaines, and then we'll go with Member Schaefer.
Great, yeah, thank you, Mr. McCool, for bringing this issue up on the agenda. And I was wondering if maybe you could just briefly give an overview in terms of how valuation is determined on railroad cars. You've mentioned, it's number of days that the car is in the state of California. And so I just thought for the benefit of the public, that would be helpful.
Sure. For our private railroad car tax, it is essentially a tax on freight cars that are physically present in the state of California. So we have voluminous reports of each rail car, which each rail car has a unique rail car number, and those cars are tracked on the number of days they are physically present in California. We also receive reports from our assessees and the annual filing due date of April 30th that describe, how old each car is, what type of car it is. So for the evaluation of private railroad cars, it is much more formulaic, laid out in statute than, for example, our state assessed property valuations are. So it is basically the reporting filed by the assessees for the cost of each rail car, depreciated, and then the factor of how many equivalent car days present in the state of California. So there's much less of a appraisal judgment in our private railroad car assessments compared to our state assessed assessments.
Great, thank you. Is there any correlation between the number of days and number of railroad cars in the state of California to economic growth? Or I'm just curious as to if there's more material being moved, is there any correlation to what's happening in the economy?
I would say certainly there is. The stronger the economy is, typically the more goods that are shipped across the country, and we will see the number of car days increase on our roll. As part of our annual recommendation to the board for the private railroad car tax, one of the items we do present is the number of equivalent car days. And we have seen, for example, most recently during the COVID-19 pandemic, we did see a drop in the number of car days, which reflects the fact that there was a shutdown in the economy for a period. And we did see a little bit of a rebound last year.
Okay.
And it'll be interesting to see, but I would expect we'd see even a little bit more of an increase again this year.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Of course.
Great.
Member Schaefer.
Yes, Mr. McCool, you mentioned it's primarily freight cars that we tax. When I think of railroads, I think of passenger vehicles, which I ride in, and private railroad cars that some wealthy investors own. Is it 90% freight or more than that? And I'd also like you another question. How many freight cars do you think get hooked together at one time? I've seen dozens. You wonder, could you have 50 or 100? I mean, sometimes you have to wait a half hour, at a road opening.
Yeah. So just to create a distinction, for some of our larger railroad state assessees, such as Union Pacific and BNSF Railway, those railroad-owned rail cars are part of our state assessment. So for the private railroad car tax, those cars have already been captured in our unitary assessment. So we're talking about private railroad cars as far as freight cars go. Yes, it's 99.9% are related to some sort of freight operation. Whether the private passenger cars, there's very, very few of those, and I don't know that we have any of those in our private railroad car assessment. I'm not aware of any of those that are currently in our assessment.
Do you know how many cars can hook up at one time?
It seems limitless sometimes,
Yeah.
but I do not have an exact number
All
now.
right, thank you.
Of course.
Thank you. I just had one quick question, and it's more of a comment, Mr. McCool. First of all, I know you mentioned that you work with the assessees throughout the year to give them plenty of opportunities to meet with your team, or if they have any concerns or questions. And I just want to commend you and your team for doing that. I think it really shows the fact that you do your due diligence on this. And the only thing I was wondering is that I know the internet now, in some ways, is it helps in terms of making contact with a lot of the individuals. And I was wondering, on our website, do we leave a place for comment or concerns without waiting for, so they don't have to wait until like February or April to reach out?
The property tax department does have a direct email address.
Okay.
So it would be a general department-wide inbox that there's a handful of our staff who are responsible for responding, or better yet, routing the emails to the appropriate person based on the topic. So we do have that for the public to utilize. And I would say specifically for the State Assessed Properties Division, we do publish an annual newsletter that is sent to our state assessees and is also on our website, and that does have a page of listing for key personnel by topic,
Thank you.
of course.
Seeing no other hands or comments, there's no motion required on this, it's just an information item.
Information only.
So I will turn it back over to Ms. Chigetti if you have.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. McCool. To accommodate our speaker from the Governor's Budget Office, can we skip to another item here so we could take them
Sure.
out of order? Is that okay?
Not a problem. Do we know what time they're going to reach us?
They're already here.
Okay.
Yeah, so we'll have.
Oh,
we'll
here she is,
begin.
okay.
We'll begin.
We'll begin.
This item is K1, Executive Director's Report. K1C is this item. Overview of a governor's proposed budget, overview of the governor's 2023-24 budget. As this item is presented by Ms. Stowers, but she is doing an introduction.
Good morning, members. Yvette Stowers, your Executive Director. I'm so pleased to introduce Ms. Erica Lee from the Department of Finance, the Deputy Director for Budgets. She is going to give you guys a more overview of the governor's proposed budget for 23-24. As you know, I provided you with a high level last month, and the Controller's Office, under Mr. Imran's leadership, was able to secure Ms. Lee. Ms. Lee?
Thank you, and good morning, Chairman Vasquez, Vice Chair Lieber, and honorable members of the board. Erica Lee with the Department of Finance, and thank you very much for the invitation to come and present the governor's budget to this body. California enters 2023 in a very different economic and fiscal landscape than the previous 2 years. The last two budgets included surpluses of about $100 billion each. This year, we're looking at revenue decreases of about 29.5 billion, and after transfers and adjustments, we're facing a $22.5 billion budget deficit. This is, the governor's budget is a $297 billion all funds expenditure plan, of which $223.6 billion is general fund. So still very big, but in comparison to where we thought we would be at the 2022 budget, we are looking at a $22.5 billion budget deficit. Now, California is used to the ups and downs caused by our progressive tax system, which has a reliance on the personal income taxes of high-income tax earners, as well as capital gains revenues. So not surprisingly, most of the downward revision that we are seeing, we are forecasting in the governor's budget, again, compared to the Budget Act, is due to about $25 billion in reduced personal income taxes. While we are up against declining revenues, this is really more of a moderation. If you look back a couple years, we are trending to where we would be. But because the last few years have been, we've seen such significant revenue increases, this does feel quite painful. Despite our revenue decline or decreases, we are actually better positioned now than we have ever been to handle a slowdown, and this is largely due to Proposition 2, which the voters passed in 2014. California now annually must set aside 1.5% of general fund revenues and transfers, as well as all capital gain revenues in excess of 8% of general fund tax proceeds. So this goes into our rainy day fund. Additionally, we have been building in budget resilience over the past several budgets. We've built strong reserves. As mentioned, we made supplemental deposits in both the rainy day fund as well as our safety net reserve fund. We've included inflationary adjustments in the out years to hold funds in case of cost increases. We've paid cash to reduce our long-term liabilities on capital projects. And very importantly, we allocated the revenue surplus that I mentioned earlier, those discretionary funds on one-time expenditures versus ongoing, knowing that they were only one-time forecasted funds coming in. So all of these measures are really important to have included in our budget because they help mitigate the need for cuts now, and particularly to our health and safety net programs, which were frankly devastated during the Great Recession. And they also help protect some of the investments that we've made over the past several budgets. So how do we solve for the $22.5 billion budget deficit? Let me just walk you through some of the buckets that are laid out in the governor's budget. The largest is funding delays. So we have about $7.4 billion worth of delays. And what this means is that we continue to prioritize these proposals or these programs, but they may start a year later, or they may take longer to implement so that we can save some of those dollars in the budget year. And it essentially means that all the funds that we allocated for these programs remain intact. They're just spent over a different number of years. The second bucket is reductions or pullbacks, equaling $5.7 billion. And the two significant items that I want to point out here are $3 billion of an inflationary adjustment that we put into next year's, the budget year. We're pulling $3 billion back. And then the second one is it's $750 million. It was a payment towards the UI trust fund debt that we have. So those are the two biggest ones in the reduction and pullback bucket. The third bucket is fund shifts. And essentially what we have been doing is, in last year's budget, as I mentioned earlier, paying cash versus taking out bonds or accruing debt. Well, we're now reversing that and going back to debt, particularly I'll point out that CSU capital projects, we're now proposing, rather than paying cash up front, that they would issue CSU-issued debt. We're also shifting certain zero-emission vehicle commitments from the general fund to the greenhouse gas reduction fund. That's about $1.4 billion. The fourth bucket is what we call trigger reductions, and these are indeed cuts. These are reductions, about 3.9 billion. And this is put in a trigger, so I'll explain what is in the trigger and then what the trigger is. Largely, the big numbers are under climate and transportation. We have 3.1 billion in trigger cuts. We have about 600 million in housing, another 100 million for parks, and 55 million in workforce training. And how the trigger works is these are essentially cuts that will happen July 1, but this time next year at the governor's budget, if revenues are coming in strong, meaning that we can fund our base programs as well as these programs, then they will trigger off. So those cuts will trigger off. And that's 3.9 billion. And our last bucket is what we call limited borrowing and revenue generation. The two that I'd like to point out, the two biggest portions of this bucket are about 850 million in general fund loans from special funds. And then we are proposing a renewal of the managed care organization tax, or the MCO tax. So while we have used many of the budget resilience measures to reduce the overall need for reductions in the governor's budget, we are actually not proposing pulling from the reserves at this point. So the governor's budget solves for the $22.5 billion deficit without pulling from the reserves. And I just want to point out two things. One is we want to retain flexibility. So if things continue to get worse in terms of revenues over the spring, then we may propose dipping into the reserves as part of the May revision. And at this point, things are not looking great, that they're trending downward. We had the finance budget bulletin, which comes out monthly and assesses the cash coming into the state. And right now, we're about $2 billion short in January based on what we thought we would be at the governor's budget. And so things are already trending worse than what we proposed in the governor's budget. So we'll see what the rest of the spring looks like, and potentially we may have to dip into the reserves. And what are the reserves? The total reserves at this point are about $35.6 billion, of which the rainy day fund makes up the largest portion, $22.4 billion. And that's the fund I mentioned earlier, where we're mandated to put in a certain amount annually. 8.5 billion is for the public school reserve. So they have their own, basically, safety net as well, so that can protect the schools. We have 900 million in the safety net reserve, and then 3.8 billion in what we call the special fund for economic uncertainties, and that's basically like our checking book, and that's the fund that we need sort of on a day-to-day basis as things come up that are sort of not planned. So to continue, we did not pull from the reserves, but we are actually not forecasting a recession come this spring. And, generally we don't forecast recessions, but obviously we looked at the economic indicators, and we believe that there are risks on the horizon, but at this point we are not forecasting an inflation. Forecasting a recession, but we are looking at inflation, the rate of inflation. We're also looking at further tightening of monetary policy through the Federal Reserve to see how those are trending. Potentially, if we do hit a recession, and this is it's important for us to note, it's also in our budget summary pages, is that even a mild recession could lead to another $20 to $40 billion in general fund hit to revenues. If it's more moderate to severe, it could be over 60 billion. So we're obviously not seeing that right now, but should there be some downward trend with the stock market, further increases in inflation, other economic indicators, the recession could be quite significant. But we are protecting a lot of things in this budget. As I said, we built in budget resilience so that we didn't have to make significant cuts. And I'll just go through some of these important priorities of both the governor as well as the legislature. In education, Prop 98 funding actually has seen very little hit. I would say that 1.5 billion less than what we were forecasting at the 22 Budget Act. And of note, the per pupil spending, general fund per pupil spending is over 17,500 per pupil. That's the highest ever, general fund. If you include all funds, it's over 23,000 per pupil. So education through the guarantee is largely spared. But in addition, we are continue to protect the universal TK program that's being implemented for all 4-year-olds, universal school meals. We've provided a statutory COLA of 8.13%. We have included an equity multiplier to support our highest needs schools and our highest needs students. We continue to make investments for arts and cultural enrichment for the elementary levels. In higher education, we maintain the higher education compacts with the UCs and the CSU, as well as a roadmap with the CCC, and that means a 5% base increase for the UC and the CSU systems. We further support financial aid programs to bring down the cost of higher education for our California students. In Health and Human Services, we continue to go full steam ahead with healthcare access for all, despite immigration status. We continue to support CalAIM with over $10 billion when it's fully implemented. CalAIM is kind of a reform of our Medi-Cal system. We support behavioral health continuum with over $8 billion in total investments over multiple years. We maintain the public health infrastructure investments that we've made through COVID and beyond. And we continue to support grants through the SSI, SSP, and CalWORKs programs. In regards to public safety, the governor's budget continues to create safer communities by supporting all the policing, task force, retail theft, organized retail theft task forces, and to reduce crime. And for homelessness and housing, we've maintained investments, all the investments we've made in homelessness, so there are no reductions in homelessness. And we continue to provide funding and technical assistance to support local entities to build their fair share of housing, including affordable units. For climate, and a lot of the one-time funding went to climate. Over $54 billion over the last 2 years was invested or committed to climate. Because we're seeing a reduction in revenues coming in, we have reduced that to $48 billion in this governor's budget. So they are taking a bit of a cut there. Important to note is we made the decision for certain cuts based on potential for backfill. And at the federal level, we have the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, as well as the IIJA, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which will provide billions and billions of more dollars to California, obviously to all states. But to this point, California has been committed $48 billion through both of those programs. And we expect to receive likely tens of billion dollars more. And so where some of those cuts were made in climate and in transportation, it's important to know that we hope to, and we will, aggressively pursue those federal funds. So in conclusion, despite a significant turn in our revenues, this budget is, I think we're all proud to say, protects a lot of the programs that were very important for both the administration and the legislature over the past 2 years. And this is in no small part due to some of the hard decisions we've had to make to build in budget resiliency for Proposition 2, to sock away funds for basically a rainy day. And the rainy day may be coming. This concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I know we have several questions, but just for kind of like the viewing audience here, when you look at the whole pie, where does most of our revenue come into our budget for the state of California?
Most of our revenue is coming in through personal income tax. So
Personal
we have
income.
the top 3, personal income tax, and we have corporate tax, and then sales and use tax, but largely PIT. And I would say PIT, personal income tax.
Oh.
Yeah, sorry. Trying not
These
to use
acronyms are-
budget
yeah.
jargon.
Okay.
And another important point is that the top 1% of our income earners bring in about 50% of our personal income tax. So I think that's important to note. And we're seeing a lot of layoffs at tech companies and higher income positions. And so obviously that's a worry as we look at revenues, what's happening with the labor market and how does that impact our revenue coming into the state.
Because that's a big question I always get, back in my district. And obviously, last couple of years have been really, the 1% has been doing very well. So obviously, we had this huge surplus. And then now you're saying, obviously, many of them are taking the hits, and some are, some of these tech companies have left as well.
Right, and also, I would add that the federal government provided significant surplus over the past, I think there were 6 surplus bills or acts that were signed, and so you see the influx of the high-income earners, as well as the significant stimulus coming in from the feds, and of course, capital gains. So when you have high-income earners, and during the pandemic, there weren't a lot of places to park money outside of the stock market, and capital gains skyrocketed. So we're seeing a moderation of that now.
I have a couple more questions, but I see a lot of hands. Let me start with my Vice Chair, Ms. Lieber first.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for coming and giving us this briefing. It's very helpful to have ourselves grounded in the knowledge about what's going on in terms of our money overall. And I do think that we're going to face more difficult days ahead here. So I had a question in terms of the trigger cuts. You mentioned that there was some housing spending that would be included in the trigger cuts. And can you say more about that?
Sure. So we have $50 million in ADU program, 200 in Dream for All program, and and the remainder in Cal Home. And so the decision to make those cuts was basically this, and they are those programs are supportive of home ownership. Of course, we're supportive of home ownership, but during this time with soaring interest rates, the plan was to maintain the investments in programs that actually built units versus home ownership. So that's the rationale for those cuts.
Okay, so you mentioned also the homelessness and housing programs separately from this. So spending on things like Home Key would still be protected under
Yes,
the
there's
proposed-
no cuts to Home Key. There are actually no cuts at all to the homelessness programs, of which we spent over $17 billion over the last 2 years. So if you think about the overall package, the cuts, we tried to be very targeted and look at home ownership again versus unit production.
Thank you. And then I had a question. You talked towards the beginning of your presentation about UI potentially being exposed to some cuts. Can you talk more about that?
Sure, and not the UI program itself, but in last year's budget, $1 billion was included to help pay off the UI trust fund balance. And so we currently have about $18 billion at the federal trust fund. We have a negative, basically, and we propose to pay off $1 billion of that, a small amount, but something to help reduce to chip away at that balance. At this point, it's one of the proposals because it's large and helps mitigate, again, cuts elsewhere. And it is something that has come up quite often in my conversations with members of the legislature and others. I think, I would just say that a lot of, this is the beginning of a conversation. The governor's budget is always the beginning of a conversation. And as we hear more and we go through the spring process, we will have a shared prioritized budget at the end. This is one issue that has constantly come up. But the one thing I would note is the way the federal unemployment tax act works is that if any state has a negative balance over a certain period of time, the credit that they offer employers is reduced. And so unless the balance is zero, the credit, whether it's 18 billion, 10 billion, 2 billion, the credit continues to be reduced. And so the value of the 750 million in terms of the credit, we had to weigh that with cuts to other programs.
Right. Yeah, and I, as much as our mission here is to look at property taxes and other taxes across the 58 counties, as we're out in our communities, and we each have very large districts, 10.7 million people. Folks look at you, oh, you're a person from the state, and I know that in the the last several years with some of the downturns that we experienced, the UI system went through a real stress test, and people were very reasonable in their nervousness about when it was going to function again. So that's something that's good information for us each to have to be able to convey to folks. So thank you so much for that.
Yes, and I would just add that we continue to support the transformation of the EDD department as well as their system. They have a modernization benefit system that they're working on that is both IT and process oriented, that in the end will take multiple years and cost likely hundreds of millions of dollars. But the value obviously to Californians is vast, and this is a combination of 3 systems that they're rolling into one, and they're improving processes. And so just that is maintained in the budget, and I think that's just important to note as well.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Controller, go ahead.
Thank you, Ms. Lee, for that very important and comprehensive presentation. I also want to thank Director Stevenshaw for coordinating this, and of course our Executive Director, Stowers. To bring one of the heads of the Department of Finance is a big deal. I also want to thank the Governor for his continued leadership in these often difficult and unprecedented times. Like mentioned by my fellow board members, the Board of Equalization continues their hard work in an $85 billion property tax system, the second largest revenue stream here in California, ensures that our local schools and governments receive the critical funding that is needed. I wanted to start off with a question specifically on the only tax credit discussed in the budget, the film tax credit, in one of California's most prestigious and iconic industries. I believe that it's imperative that Californians have an opportunity to be part of this industry. And I was just wondering what the details were. I understand that the governor is requesting a 5-year extension to make the tax credit refundable. And can you speak to the governor's continued commitment to this program and what the measurements of workforce diversity and equity are surrounding the film tax credit?
Sure, thank you for that question. Yes, the proposal is that when the current film tax credit, let's call it 3 because it's the third, ends in 24-25, the proposal would extend, create 4.0, basically, the film tax credit 4.0 for an additional 5 years, $330 million annually. And the details are obviously still being worked out. We have a trailer bill and have been working with stakeholders as well as including members and representatives of industry to work on just what you mentioned, equity, and making sure that those production companies that are supporting greater equity could potentially receive, bonus points for credits, let's say. That's still being worked out, and I think the new thing is the proposal for refundability. So if an entity couldn't use those tax credits in a given year, it could roll over to the next year, which is in response to some of what we've heard industry saying was a barrier for some smaller production companies to come in because they couldn't benefit from the value of a credit in a given year. So more to come on that, I'd say.
Thank you. Looking forward to that. I wanted to turn my focus to education. Yes, please.
Thank you, sir. Film tax credit. When you say refundability, is that just limited to income tax, or does it also include sales and use tax?
It's the refundability of the use of that particular
Okay,
credit.
so no matter what, so, because I've worked with them for a while, and the small ones generally do not have an income tax liability, but they could benefit from not having to pay the sales and use tax.
Yeah, and again, more conversations are being had so that more companies can benefit.
Thank you, Executive Director. So I want to turn my focus to education. I'm a former school teacher, and I want to start off by thanking the governor for protecting classroom funding and championing early childhood education as California seeks to close the achievement gap and improve math and reading proficiencies across the state. You mentioned it in your remarks. I just wanted you to kind of expand on the Universal Transitional Kindergarten, TK, and if this rollout is still planned for 2025.
Yes, so the universal TK was always going to be a multi-year implementation, and there are no changes to the program. It still will be implemented by '25, and along with additional funding for school districts to accept more students as they roll through the months, additional funds for adults in the classroom are also included in this budget, as planned, so no cuts.
Thank you. Is there like some type of study or data looking into making TK a full day instead of half day?
There are definitely conversations around a full-day TK versus a half-day for many reasons, for the benefit of the students, benefit of families, working families, opportunities. So that those conversations continue.
Yeah, just for working families to be able to take advantage of that, single parent versus two-parent households, I think is really important, so I want to thank the governor for that too. And lastly, I just have some comments on the universal school meals. For any and all school children, I understand that they have a guaranteed 2 free hot meals a day, no questions asked. That's incredible and remarkable for California's 6 million school children when it comes to health, nutrition, and food security, and to my understanding, a first of its kind in the nation. So great work, and my hat's off to you. Thank you again, Ms. Lee.
Thank you.
Yes, Member Gaines.
Great, thank you very much, Ms. Lee, for your presentation. I really appreciate it. And you went into a lot of detail, and I just wanted to ask a couple of questions to help clarify in my mind what's happening. In reference to the gas tax, I wanted to just clarify, in my mind, is that being protected in terms of that money being used for road maintenance, or has money been pulled away from that?
And you're specifically to SB1 funds?
Yes.
There are some funding swaps. So some of the general fund that was for active transportation, for example, that was general fund, about $200 million will now be, we're proposing the state highway account funds would be used in its stead. That's one example, I think, of potentially two, totaling about maybe $300 million. I'd have to get back to you on the exact
Okay,
number
but
of that.
that money's still being expended?
Yes.
Or, yeah, okay.
Yes.
Because I've seen gas tax money reallocated through the legislature when I served there. There have been assurances that that would not happen with SB1, so just trying to make sure that it's actually being implemented the way it was at least discussed and proposed.
Yeah, that is the only fund transfer in the governor's budget that's being proposed, and it's being used on active transportation.
Okay, all right, very well, thank you. And then in reference to EDD, we had a huge fraud issue there. Based on what our state auditor said, it looked like upwards of $30 billion. And you mentioned that measures are being taken to change the computer system.
Yes, and the large amount of fraud was found to be in the federal PUA, which is the Pandemic Unemployment Act, and it is not on the backs of California employers. This is that was fraud that the federal government will end up paying for, in part because of the way in which that program was rolled out during the pandemic to get funds quickly to people, and there wasn't the requirement of all the front-end identity checks that are present in the existing unemployment insurance program. And so the fraud that you've mentioned, again, I just want to note, because I think it's really important, that the Californians are not paying for that. That is not part of the $18 billion UI trust fund balance I mentioned earlier.
Right.
Also of note, part of the EDD funding that was included in last year's budget, that is maintained in this year's budget, is $85 million towards fraud prevention and mitigation. To address exactly as you said, some of the fraud of the existing state program.
Okay. Well, that's good to hear about employers not being saddled with that. I worry about us as taxpayers in general, because it's the feds that are now picking that up. But that is good in terms of employers. You had also mentioned that in terms of climate, $54 billion had been spent in the last 2 budget years. Is that accurate?
54 billion was allocated over multiple years.
Okay.
And because we don't have the 54 billion, we are bringing that down to 48 billion in the
Okay.
governor's budget. And again,
Okay.
these are monies to be spent. Some of them are being expended in the current year, but a lot of it was over multiple years, up to 5 years.
Okay, very well, thank you. And then in terms of the rainy day fund, you said there was a $7 billion, I call it an augmentation, but it reduced the deficit from 29.5 to 22.5. Did that money come from the rainy day fund?
No, sorry, the decrease in revenues total about 29.5 billion, but after adjustments and other technical
Okay.
Changes from year to year, the actual deficit that we have to solve for is 22.5 billion.
Okay.
So we have not touched the rainy day fund at all.
Good, that's good news. And can you tell me how much is in that rainy day fund? Roughly?
22.4.
Oh, okay. All right, that's wonderful, great. And then just in general, we've seen our population decline for the last 2 years in a row here in the state of California. My concern is that we have people of means that are moving out of the state and therefore not paying taxes anymore, and then also businesses that have had an impact here in the state. Is anything being done to rectify that? My concern is that we become a bifurcated society of folks that are really well off and those who are very poor and who need services. And our revenue in the long term then declines, the middle class shrinks. Is there any discussion or concern or programs or anything that's being done on that front?
Sure, and there is definitely an awareness that over the past several years, the inward migration has been reduced when compared to outward migration, and add to that, unfortunately, COVID-related deaths.
Yeah.
And more global, well, not globally, nationally, a reduction in immigration, both under previous administration, but also as a result of COVID and borders closing. So I think California is really seeing the impacts of that sort of lack of migration, and we do hear often in the news about companies and people leaving, and I would also just say that there are companies coming and there are companies being created in the state that don't often get the same press as those that are leaving, but the awareness that these numbers are trending down, we're acutely aware.
Yeah.
And a couple things that I would highlight are, over the past couple of years, when we have had surplus, we have tried to provide further supports to businesses, such as grants and more tax credits, and to incent more businesses to basically compete in California. We have the Cal Competes grants, we have the Cal Competes credits, and trying to make a more friendly and encouraging environment for businesses. So I think that's one thing, understanding that small business is really the economic engine of the economy and wanting to support them. So there are definitely programs that we've implemented, both adding to old programs as well as creating new programs to incent businesses to come and businesses to stay. One being the film tax credit. That's something that as we continue, we do want California, Hollywood, anywhere across the state to remain the number one place for production to occur. And so I think there are measures that we are attempting to take through the budget, as well as investments in, Visit California, having more people come, love it, and stay. But obviously, we have housing affordability issues, and so trying to address that issue, as well as the cost of food and other things that, are going up across the country, but notably in California. So attempting to address some of the problems that we see to reduce the affordability problem.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Member Schaefer.
Yes, thank you. Ms. Yim, we are all speaking up for taxpayers, and the fact that our property taxes are less than our income taxes shows that maybe we're doing a pretty good job in keeping property taxes down. You mentioned Hollywood. I've been on Criminal Minds TV show, and I've been to a couple movies as an extra, and I know that there's a lot of competitive, I think Georgia and some other states are spending tons of money to steal the production of films from California, and I think they've been pretty good at it. So California is not the state for making movies, but it's up there, and I so support California continuing to have some dominance in the filmmaking business. There are 8 states that have no income tax, no personal tax whatsoever. That's Nevada, Texas, Alaska, Florida, South Dakota, Tennessee, Washington, and Wyoming. It hasn't always been that income tax has been the majority of revenue for our state. Do you know when that happened? When did property taxes stop being 51%?
I don't know when that switch occurred. I know, as I mentioned earlier, the top 3 are the personal income tax, corporate tax, and sales and use tax. But I've just been handed a note here that it was 1935 to 37. So,
Yeah, well, I didn't come along till 1938, so I missed all that. Thank you very much.
thank you.
No wonder you didn't know. No, thank you, Ms. Lai, for your presentation, and also, wanted to also chime in and thank the governor. You know, as a former educator, I didn't realize we had others on the dais as well, that he's protecting education. I think that's so key. And then housing. I noticed you mentioned that, you know, he's trying to bring down the cost, because, you know, that's, these nonprofits, when you talk to them, that's the number one thing. It's so expensive to build a true affordable unit. And I know land cost is a big part of it, especially in some of our urban areas that are very pricey. So that's always the challenge. And whatever, and it sounds like he's working with many of the entities and the partners to partnership with them in leveraging our dollars, not only with the state, but the federal, but then the local
Right.
municipalities to make that happen. So I just wanted to send that out to the governor and thank him for that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again for this opportunity.
Thank you.
Ms. Cicchetti, what's the next item?
Go back to the top of the agenda where we were.
Okay.
Back to item E, tax programs, non-appearance matters adjudicatory. Item E3, legal appeals, property tax matters, Section 40 decisions. E3A, Southern California Edison Company, 0148 SAU 22-006. This matter will be presented remotely by Ms. Yim.
Welcome. I see you on the screen.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Vasquez and honorable members of the board. I'm Sonia Yim, the appeals attorney for this case. As you'll recall, Southern California Edison Company's 2022 appeal was decided by the board in December 2022. This decision was final at the time it was made by the board. However, as the amount in controversy exceeded $500,000 in tax, the board is required under Revenue and Taxation Code Section 40 to adopt and publish a written decision to the board's website within 120 days of the original decision. This allows for transparency and memorialization of the board's decision. A draft non-precedential written decision has been submitted for your consideration. I recommend that the board adopt this written decision to fulfill the board's obligations under Section 40. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Yim. I was just wondering, especially for the new members here, if you could, because I know you spent a lot of time to make sure this happened in a timely manner, if you can kind of walk us through in that summary and present, the process and the rights that they have for their appeals as well, just to kind of bring our new members up to speed as well.
Generally, the state, as Mr. McCool has presented earlier, the State Assessed Properties Division appraises each state assessed assessee, and they have the right to appeal. The appeals are heard in November and December, and the board came to a final decision. The board comes to a final decision during that time.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments from anybody? Seeing none?
Do you have,
Oh, did I hear somebody? No? Okay. Members, would, anyone would like to make a motion on this item?
Did we get our public comment?
Well, we'll do it before we take a vote.
Okay.
Does it matter, Mr. Chickadee, if we do the motion first or after?
It doesn't matter. We could do either one.
Okay. What's your preference?
Be happy to move the adoption of these two items.
I'll
We-
sec,
we're-
oh, we
We're
got a
taking
second?
them
Okay.
separately. We're going to take these items separate because they're two different cases.
Okay, I'll move the adoption of the recommendation on item 3A.
I'll second that. Do we need, we don't have any written comments on
I was
this.
just going to say, we have no written comments received, and there's no one in the audience who wanted to make a presentation. Let me go to the AT&T moderator.
Thank you.
AT&T moderator, please let us know if there's anyone on the line who'd like to make a public comment regarding this item.
if you have a comment, please press 1, then 0. And there are no comments at this time.
Okay, then, seeing no other comments or questions, Mr. Chickadee, will you please call the roll on the first motion?
Okay. Member Lieber presented a motion to adopt the staff recommendation on this Section 40 matter, and Mr. Vasquez seconded the matter. Let me call the roll. Chair Vasquez,
Aye.
Vice Chair Lieber,
Aye.
Member Gaines, Member Schaefer,
I pass.
Deputy Controller Emron.
Aye.
So we have a majority on that. Thank you. Vice Chair Lieber, you're up again.
Thank you. I'd like to move adoption of the recommendation on item 3B.
All righty.
I'll second that.
Okay, that's fine. Let me go out. We have no public comment within the audience, and I have not received any written comments on this. Let me go to the AT&T moderator on this item. AT&T moderator, is there anyone on the line who'd like to make a public comment regarding this item?
Once again, please press 1, then 0 if you have a comment. And there are no comments.
Alrighty, we have Member Vice Chair Lieber making the motion to accept staff recommendation on the Section 40 matter for SFPP LP, and seconded by Mr. Vasquez. The roll, Chair Vasquez,
Aye.
Vice Chair Lieber,
Aye.
Member Gaines.
Aye.
Member Schaefer,
Aye.
Deputy Controller Emron.
Aye.
So that's unanimous. With that, Mr. Chickadee, if you would go on to our next item.
Our next item on the agenda is item F, Other Tax Program, Non-Appearance Matters, Contribution Disclosure Forms Not Required Pursuant to Government Code Section 15626. F1 is Audits. F1C is Global Star USA LLC, number 2772. F1D, Net Fortress Acquisition Company, Inc., number 8164, and number F1E, Intermountain Infrastructure Group LLC, number 8218. Mr. McCool will present the three items for your consideration, which may be voted on individually or collectively. These matters are a constitutional function. Therefore, the Deputy Controller, Emron, may not participate in accordance with Government Code Section 7.9. This matter will be presented by Mr. McCool.
Thank you. Good morning again, Chair Vasquez and honorable members of the board. My name is Jack McCool, Chief of the State Assessed Properties Division. The State Assessed Properties Division performs routine audits of state assessees under the authority of California Revenue and Taxation Code 828 and Government Code Section 15618. The purpose of a property tax audit is to determine the accuracy, completeness, and reliability of the financial data furnished by state assessees and used by the board in the valuation process. Audits also include an internal review of the methods, calculations, and assumptions used by the State Assessed Properties Division. Before you today for your consideration are 3 property tax audits completed by State Assessed Properties Division staff. The assessees have been presented with a copy of the audit report and provided an opportunity to provide additional information in response to the audit report. None of the assessees provided additional information. I am available to answer questions if needed, and I ask for your adoption of these 3 audits. Thank you.
I so move.
Well, I believe we were going to hold this, right? Because
We
the
could hold the
controller
vote over for
is-
later,
is gonna
yes. We
come
let
in-
Mr.
will
McCool
be
make the
on Later for the
presentation.
vote.
Oh.
But if you have any questions, if people have any questions, this is the time to raise them.
We could take a vote now and leave it open for just Ms. Cohen's vote,
Oh, and not close the vote?
and just not close the vote, correct?
Okay. You know, I
So,
just,
Mr. Schaefer,
I'm sorry. I just had one quick question.
Sure.
And it's, as I was looking at, the 3 individual, you mentioned the 3 individual audit matters. For the auditees found to have discrepancies either escaped or excessive, do we subsequently go back to see if corrections were made or processes were improved to ensure assessees report accurately?
Yes, that is part of the audit process. Not only are we looking for misreporting or incorrect reporting, we're also make ourselves available to help the assessees report correctly going forward. So that is part of our normal process.
Thank you. With that, members, I would like to entertain a motion. I guess we could approve this all 3 on this one.
I made a motion.
Oh, I'm sorry. So we have a motion by Member Schaefer to approve all 3 of these items. Oh, I'm sorry.
Could you clarify the 3 items, please?
Sure. If we could read those back into the record.
Yes, I can,
Mr.
yeah. Item F1C, Global Star USA LLC, number 2772. F1D, Net Fortress Acquisition Company, Inc., number 8164. And F1E, Intermountain Infrastructure Group LLC, number 8218.
Do you need a second?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll second the motion.
It's been moved and second, and we'll go ahead and take the vote and then hold it open until, I believe it's not until after lunch that
Not till after lunch,
the controller will join us, and so she can cast her vote as well.
Okay,
Ms. Cicchetti, if you would please call the roll.
yeah. Chairman Vasquez.
Aye.
Vice Chair Lieber.
Aye.
Member Gaines. Member Schaefer.
Aye.
So that'll stay open. Do we need to go, is it appropriate to go out to the public to see if there's anybody on the line, or can we wait?
Yes, we should go out to the public, correct. at and T moderator, is there anyone on the line who'd like to make a public comment regarding this matter?
If you'd like to make a comment, please press 1, then 0. And there are no comments.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Thank
Then-
you.
Then we'll go ahead and just leave the vote open, and then with that, Ms. Cicchetti, if you would please go on to our next item.
Okay. We're going to go into the administrative section now of the agenda. The next item up is J, Administrative Consent Agenda. Contribution disclosure forms are not required for this one. J1, Adoption of the Board Meeting Minutes. The board meeting minutes of January 24th, 2023. The meeting minutes were attached to the public agenda notice for your consideration.
And it looks like we have Ms. Stowers on.
No, I'm just getting ready.
Oh, you're just getting ready, okay.
I could go out to the at and T moderator. We have no written comments on this one, and no one in the audience to make a comment on this. at and T moderator, please let us know if there's anyone on the line who'd like to make a public comment regarding this item.
Once again, please press 1, then 0. And there are no comments.
Members, do we have any comments, corrections? Seeing and hearing no hands? I'd like to. It's been moved by our vice chair. I'll go ahead and second that.
Okay.
You want to, let's go ahead and call the roll on this.
Okay, yes. Chairman Vasquez,
Aye.
Vice Chair Lieber,
Aye.
Member Gaines, Member Schaefer,
Aye.
Deputy Controller Emron.
Aye.
So that's unanimous of all those present. With that, Ms. Cicchetti, would you go on to our next item?
Our next item is K, other administrative matters. Item K1, Executive Director's Report. K1A, Organizational Update. Report on the status of pending and upcoming organizational priorities. This matter will be presented by Ms. Stowers.
Good
Welcome.
morning, members, Chair Vasquez, Vice Chair Lieber. I am Yvette Stowers, your Executive Director. For today's report, I will provide an update on Support Service Division and highlight upcoming events, the California Taxpayers Association 97 Annual Meeting. Members, as you are aware, the past several months have been very, very busy for our Support Services Division. This division is in charge of all of the administrative work it takes to run our agency. In addition to their regular workload, they have been working very, very hard to welcome and onboard our new member, Ms. Lieber, her staff, and your members, your new staff. I just want to say thank you very much to support. They've done an excellent job in facilitating this. In addition to the new members, they also had to do a transition from D to now our controller's office. So they were extremely busy. And I just want to just give them a hand clap. And I'm going to say this. I told staff to put this on the agenda, and I'm going off script now. Because I want those who are listening to understand that although we do not have a HR administrative division, we still have to move things forward. And that's why we have the Support Service Division. I'm grateful and thankful that we have funding for them, and we probably need more. That's another conversation. Okay, and let me talk about what they do. They do facilities, contracts, technology. They're extremely busy. So, again, thank you guys. Thank you, thank you. They're under the leadership of Kathy Taylor. The next item that I want to talk about is the upcoming March 23rd board meeting with the California Taxpayers Association. I do believe you all received an invitation. And again, this is a great opportunity where the members are there speaking with various business owners, talking about property tax issues. It's 7 or 7:30 a.m. I will be there. Some people behind me will be there. And I know that you guys will be there as well. And then, Mr. Imran, you have a special role. We call it Vanna White. You award the best question, not to the members, but to the public. Okay, moving on to K1B. Extension of time to complete the local assessment role. Members, Revenue and Taxation Code 616 requires county assessors to annually complete their local assessments role by July 1st. Section 155 provides that the board or the executive director may extend by 30 days the deadline for any official act by the assessor. In the case of public calamity, we may extend it by additional 10 days to 40 days. Section 155 also requires the executive director to inform this board of any such extension at its next regular meeting. This report is to inform you that San Luis Obispo and Trinity County assessors have requested and have been granted a 30-day extension to complete their 2023 local assessment role. Members, that completes my report. Are there any questions for me?
I have a couple. When going back to the Supportive Services Division, I also would like to just chime in and thank your, your staff, especially with my new staff, chief of staff, in that transition period. And I know they probably were taxing your staff quite a bit on that, just to bring them up to speed. So thank you for that. And on your last part of your report that you just mentioned, that we sometimes, like you just mentioned, get requests from the assessors for extensions. For the viewing audience, what might constitute a good reason for an extension?
It's generally speaking, workload, staffing for them, staffing. And some of the assessors, they do make the request in advance, but they still get their role completed by July 1st. It's just more of just in case something goes wrong. I don't think the CAA president is in the audience, but
No, I don't. Oh, she is in the back.
no, but
But a rep.
the vice president is here. If you want to speak on it, I know that you guys, they come to us on a regular basis. It's almost, I'm not gonna call it routine, but we know starting February through the end of June, we will get these requests, and we will respond.
Now, I bring it up because it seems like it comes up every year, and you're right. Most of the time, they put in the request, and in many cases, probably 99% of the time, they do turn it in on time. But I was just more for like the viewing audience. But since we have part of the leadership here, welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you, Chair Vasquez. I am Sacramento County Assessor Christina Nguyen, and I am Vice President of CAA this year. I think that what you'll see is assessors will preemptively apply for the extension. Just, it prepares everybody, their own Department of Finance. Everyone is sort of given notice. We may have a delay. There's a lot of things that have to happen to get the roll closed, and with Prop 19 implementation, staffing shortages, some are just extra cautious and file in advance. I believe Sacramento County filed a couple years ago because of the pandemic. If you had a calamity in your county, you may be asking to file for that reason. So it does happen. I don't think you should be alarmed by it.
And while I have you up here, you mentioned Prop 19.
Yes.
How's that going? Here we're, in, I
Well-
guess, year 2 or 3 now.
You know, we're still working on implementing everything internally. That means updating our systems and getting good at coordinating with our county partners, our other county assessors. We're exchanging information. We're looking forward to developing a portal where that would help us sort of facilitate it. Right now, we have 58 different email addresses. We send things back and forth. The law is complex in a lot of ways, probably more ways than anybody could have imagined. We're impacted by different scenarios that are popping up, so we continue to just work through it. We get a lot of legal advice from our county councils and our fellow assessors, helping us work through. So it's still a challenge. I would say people are definitely impacted. We're still, some counties hired more staff for the processing. I know in Sacramento, we hired 3 additional staff to assist with customer service and processing. So it is impacting us in that way. And of course, that's not always popular because you're hiring people when you're taking money off the roll, So, but at the same time, we have an obligation to the public to process these claims and give the benefits, so.
Thank you. I see a couple hands here. Member Schaefer, and then we'll go to Member
Yes,
Haynes.
Ms. Dowers, if somebody's thinking they're going to need an extension, but they're not sure, and then it comes up, it's the final day, and oops, we didn't request it. Can they come in, the day after and say, we need it?
They can come in the day of.
Or the-
And we are extremely flexible, but I would say this, that although some counties I would come to you for the next 3 months, asking for, saying that we approved. Most of them ask, but they do not need. Most of the counties, and I'm gonna say 99.9% of them get their roles done on time.
So we're nice to our assessors.
Yes, we're very nice. Those, and it's just a print. They ask, but they pride themselves on knowing that they got their roles done on time.
Sure.
I think last year I made a mistake and said somebody was late, and they corrected me.
It's really difficult when you're late because the Department of Finance within your county is required, they're counting on that information at a certain time. So if you don't get that to them, then they're impacted in what they do. So it's more than just, we have this statutory obligation, we're also impacting everybody else down the line. So it's really important that we're trying to complete it on time and accurately, so.
I like that accurate.
Member Gaines?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christine Wynn, for being here, and you're in my district, and you're a great leader in the state in terms of what you do as an assessor, so I thank you for that. But I just wanted to get some clarification on Prop 19, which, just for the record, I didn't support it, but it's passed, and we have to implement it. It's my understanding that there was an element of that initiative that provided funding, I thought, to the county assessors for the additional workload. Number one, is that accurate?
Well,
And-
what we understand is there's offset funding for
Okay.
counties experiencing a loss. We don't fully understand yet what that will look like.
Okay.
Because the official reporting periods are in the future. I believe 2025 is the first one.
Okay,
So
so in the meantime,
In the meantime, we're doing our job as we need to do it.
okay.
And we'll see what happens as we proceed on. What's not understood is if you have a gain in your county, what does that mean? Do you pay then? Or how's that going to work? Or is it all collected probably behind the scenes is my guess. But that part really hasn't been explained to us. And that's sort of more in the Department of Finance side of operations of the county. Right now, we're just collecting the data because we're going to have to report to CDTFA
Okay.
through the Department of Finance on our gains and losses.
Yes, okay. And I guess the other thought I had is there's been some discussion about, is there a tweak or a change or an adjustment that could be made to Prop 19? Because I think part of this impact is on first-generational wealth. And folks that have worked hard their entire life and been successful enough to get a rental or two, and now those are being reassessed, especially in areas where values have gone up dramatically over the last 30 or 40 years. And so is that something that we as a board could look to you and the Assessors Association in terms of if we were able to come up with an idea, if it passed through the legislature, if it went through on the ballot and was approved, we just want to make sure that that was implemented in the right fashion. And we would like to have your input to make sure that we do that in the right way.
Well, of course, we definitely would like to engage in that process because there are a lot of technicalities involved in assessment administration, and sometimes when laws are passed, those things aren't really thought of.
Okay.
And complications arise.
Sure.
Because of that. So definitely, we would engage in that process. We always try to, and do our best to make sure that we could administer whatever it was that was being passed.
Sure.
Which, of course, would be a constitutional amendment, a ballot measure.
Yes. And I don't want to speak for the whole board. I mean, but there have been some talk, a little discussion here and there, and I'm just curious as to what is that pathway, and we
And you're
want to make sure we
talking
engage
about-
the association and
Yeah,
fix
you're
this.
talking about the inheritance portion,
Mhm.
not the base year transfer
No,
portion. So the
no.
inheritance cutbacks that were made and
Yes.
possibly reinstating some of those benefits, and that's, I think, what you're referring to.
Yes, and I think there was also an aspect with disabled individuals that got the benefit, I think, on base year value, but not on the other side in terms of transfer of inheritance.
Yeah, I don't think that the disabled persons were impacted by the inheritance change.
Okay.
I don't recall that that occurred because the inheritance is not really tied to anyone's like exempt status.
Okay.
It's just on, whether the person is occupying the property as their primary
Okay.
residence in
But if-
perpetuity. That was one of the big items, plus.
Okay. So if it were, because we heard some cases of parents with adult disabled
Oh.
children, that it was messing up the finances in terms of cash
Right,
flow
because
for that.
everyone's ability to inherit was limited,
Yeah.
regardless of your
Okay.
exempt status. So you're talking about a particular portion that could
Yeah.
maybe be reinstated through a
Okay.
new ballot measure, but.
Sure.
Yeah, so, and the stats are being gathered now as to the
Mm-hmm.
impacts of all the changes that came from Prop 19. So data should be coming available fairly soon, so that could be examined. But my understanding, there was an attempt already to put a ballot measure out there that didn't get enough signatures.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if there'll be going down that same path again,
Yes.
and at what point.
Yes, maybe through the legislature, though, if there were agreement. But that's to be discussed. Thank you.
Sure.
Appreciate it.
Of course.
Thank you
You're
very
welcome.
much.
I know I have questions, no, there's more questions I think for you.
Oh, sorry.
And actually, you just
said-
brought up a point, I had just more of a clarifying question. When you mentioned on principal residence,
Yeah.
especially with Prop 19, I had a call a couple of months, I guess it was last month, when a property goes into probate, for example, if one of the members, the living members, was to move into it while it's in probate, does that kind of put a hold on the reassessment of that property?
Well, it depends. I have to
Okay.
say it that way. But what I would say is that's a smart move because when you read the law, it actually says more about when they move in versus when they file for the homeowner's exemption. So it's actually more important to move into the property within 1 year than it is to get the homeowner's exemption, which you still do have to do. But the actual act of making the home your primary residence is the most important thing. And that's where it's sort of a gray area where people, I think, don't understand. They think the homeowner's exemption is the key. It's actually, when do you occupy the property? And so moving into it will help preserve the ability to get the benefits. So I think that's probably a good move if that's the person that will be inheriting the property and qualifying for the benefit. So,
Okay.
Members, if I may interject, great conversation, and I appreciate you coming up. But
Are we a little off topic there? I
Yeah.
think so, okay.
So let's do this. Maybe we should have another public policy hearing on Prop 19,
We should.
okay? And we can have more dialogue without legal telling me that we're off topic.
Thank you for coming up. I guess
I'm
we'll
happy to-
we'll have to excuse you now.
It's
then.
okay.
We'll get
Thank
back
you.
on the agenda.
Thank you very much. Can I-
But I know there was a,
Thank you, members. Our executive director is correct, and of course, thank you, Assessor Wynn, for coming up and providing great information, but we are kind of
Off
going
topic,
far off topic. We should agendize this for a future meeting. Thank you.
sounds good. Thank you.
we will do that. Going back on topic here, I know there was hands still up, and let me go with my Vice Chair Lieber first.
Thank you. Well, I always appreciate the dialogue with the assessors, and I think it's very valuable to have them here. And I was going to suggest just that we agendize an item when that data starts to come available and time permits. I think it would be very fruitful. And if we let folks know in advance that it's going to be on the agenda, then I know that we're going to have a great deal of interest in it. And then I just wanted to comment as one of I am the new person. We've got someone who's almost new who's here. I very much want to commend the support services. I know that Mr. Gaines knows that I am a very fiscally conservative, progressive person. I always want to watch the money very closely, and so it's really been a point of pride for me to get to know the agency and to see that it is very lean and effective and provides a great benefit for the taxpayers. And it's lean and not at all mean. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Deputy Controller.
Thank you to the assessors for showing up today. It means a lot to make this board function. You are an important part of it. And also to Executive Director Stowers, I want to just appreciate you for this moment. I know you've been on this job for less than a year. It's been a huge role that you filled, but you're doing an incredible job, and it's been a pleasure to work with you in my old and now new capacity, and also to the Support Services Division. Always professional, always timely, and I really do appreciate everything that you've all done. And then just last point is for the CalTax meeting, I have confirmed my attendance too. So looking forward to that best question and the breakfast with the BoE members. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Member Gaines.
Yeah, I really like your question and the clarity that Assessor Nguyen provided in terms of how important it is for the family to move into
Moving
that
in.
house. And I thought maybe we could work with our communications department and add that in our Prop 19 information for folks, because we don't want them to lose that status if there's a family
No.
member that wants to move into the home.
Well noted. I guess we could include that in our website, and we talk to,
We
well, we have Ms.
will.
Stowers here, so.
You know, behind the scenes, as you guys are making suggestions, we're taking notes, and we will have a meeting, we call it our board member assignment, and that will be on the top of our list to
Right.
see what we can do to further educate the public. And appreciate the assessor from Sacramento being here. And we always have someone, it's either the president or the vice president, either in person or behind the scenes, because we are in partnership. So, thank you again.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
I think my other item was going to be the governor's budget, but we covered that.
Okay.
All righty.
If we're good, then Ms. Cicchetti, what do we have
Yes.
next?
Yes, we're just going to go along then. We're going to continue on the Executive Director's Report to K1D, Operational Priorities Report, the report on the status of the operational priorities of the BoE. This matter will be presented by Ms. Frenati.
Good morning, honorable members, Chairman Vasquez and Vice Chair Lieber. I am Lisa Renati, the Chief Deputy Director of the Board of Equalization. Today I'll report on some of the agency's operational priorities and projects. The first item is workforce planning. Workforce planning is to address the current and future needs of our workforce. This includes developing strategies to attract and retain employees, creating training programs to meet the needs of our diverse and changing workforce, and developing our employees to take on key roles when current leaders retire or move on to other positions. Since our last meeting, we have filled 3 vacant positions. One is a promotion of an internal candidate, and the other 2 positions are new to the BoE. As a side note, one of the new BoE employees found out about the BoE from our posting on Cal Careers, and the other from our BoE social media posting. We continue to actively recruit our vacancies by using multiple recruitment approaches, including participation in 6 recruitment events planned for the first half of this year. These events include career fairs at universities, a professional organization, and a multi-agency event coordinated by the EDD. Members, the next item is a status on our IT modernization project. A request for information, frequently referred to as an RFI, was released to the public on January 24th. The RFI is regarding the design, development, and implementation of a new board roll system for our agency. The goal of this RFI is to collect information from interested parties with the necessary skills and experience in designing workload and case management systems to meet our technology needs. We will use this information from the RFI to develop and finalize requirements that will be used in the next phase of our IT modernization project. The deadline to submit responses to the RFI is today, February 22nd. Additional information can be found at DGS's Cal eProcure website. And this concludes my report. I am happy to answer any questions you may have.
Yeah, let me go. I see a question here on my left here with Member Gaines.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just wanted to compliment you on continuing to positions at the BoE. So it's encouraging that we're promoting within, but also bringing folks in from the outside, and the fact that they saw our promotion, at least one employee, future employee did, and followed through with it is encouraging.
Yes.
So thank you.
Thank you.
I just had a couple of quick questions for you. First, just an update. I know briefly, what are the general scope for our main focus on the IT modernization project?
Well, the project is to modernize and streamline our board roll system and a case management program. And so our board roll system is our statewide state-assessed roll, and we allocate those to different counties. And our current system is old, I'll say that, it's antiquated. It's a little more people-driven. We would like to have a modernized solution. So the RFI is seeking, collecting information from all those interested parties to see if anyone has a system or they have any questions for us about the system. And it's just really the baby step of this project to find out if anyone's interested in our project and can ask us more questions.
You mentioned RFI, and I guess just for the United, that's requests for information,
Correct.
On that project, can you kind of summarize what's the purpose of the RFI?
It's to collect that information from different people to tell us who has the skills, who has that experience in designing systems and workload, and then we'll use that information to develop and finalize our requirements. And that'll be the next step. We'll issue what our requirements for the system are. And ultimately, down the road, the requirements will be used to go out and find, either do a request for proposal or do some type of bid to get a system that we can purchase.
So we
Hopefully-
can modernize it.
I'll modernize, yes.
So like we're presenting, we have an issue. We need to modernize our role. And we're looking to technology vendors to provide us with a solution.
Sounds
It's a
good.
California process.
It's just it's the
Ah, yeah.
California way. And the long go, we don't know what the solution is, because neither one
We're
of us are
hoping cheap.
We're not
Yeah, we're
techie,
hoping cheap.
But we're hoping it's going to be very inexpensive
And works well.
and works well.
I'm with you. I'm not an IT person either.
Yeah. But if it's something more, we would keep you informed. If we have to go that expansive technology project, we will follow the state process, including Department of Technology, when it comes to a new system. But if it's something that's available off the shelf, that's best.
Whatever works best, because we have such a large board roll. We need to make sure that we can't fail at making sure we get the board roll done correctly and timely. So we're looking towards the future.
No, I appreciate it. Having stepped out of my role as the franchise tax board member and now coming back, I went on the tour and I couldn't believe just in this little short window of a little over a year, modernization that's taking place over there with technology. It's advanced so much.
They're EDR 1, 2, 3. I think they
Right.
may be on 4 or 5 by now.
Yeah.
We're not there. We're doing baby steps.
I know.
I think I said before, crawl, walk, run. We're crawling when it comes to technology, not as an agency.
Well, it's good to hear that you're moving on it, though. Any other comments, questions? Oh, yes, Member Gaines.
Just a question of procedure. I notice we have a few folks in the audience that I think are going to speak at some point. I'm just
Yes.
trying to figure out, are they aware of the timeline and when they would speak?
As far as I know,
Okay.
because the agenda was out, yeah.
Okay.
And we do have a lunch break coming up, so I think it's going to take place just after that.
Oh, it is? Okay, all right. As they're aware, I hate to have folks waiting for an undue period of time, but
No, and then I know we have former members, or actually former BOE member, that have put in requests to speak under our public comment, which is our end item.
okay,
which,
very
yeah.
good. Thank you.
Will they be able to stay with us through the afternoon? I'd hate to lose them.
I'm assuming they budgeted their time, because that hasn't changed. We haven't changed the schedule.
They had a plane to catch or something, I would move.
Ms.
there.
Stowers, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Chair Vasquez, at your pleasure, you can take something out of order So if, at your pleasure, if you want to take up
Here we go.
items not on the agenda for public comment.
Normally, that would be correct, that you could move things out of order. I would not recommend doing that with items not on the agenda because it has been published at the end of the agenda. We may have someone calling in who wishes to speak toward the end of the day, and if you had called it earlier, they would miss their opportunity to speak, so.
But
in-
that,
in-
that may not happen, we don't know.
True, but.
Could I ask Mr. Parrish if he finds it convenient to stay to the afternoon, or would you have some reason you want to be heard?
He's a policy wonk with us.
Thank you.
Question if I could follow up?
Yes, Member Gaines, go ahead.
Yeah, for Mr. Nanjo, in
Yes,
terms
sir.
of, I mean, if our wording was different on the agenda, would that give us more flexibility in a meeting?
You could change the wording to make it more flexible, but I would query whether or not that would be viewed as taxpayer or public friendly, because if you can move it at any time, then a member of the public who would like to speak on matters not on the agenda wouldn't know where they would be speaking, so they would have to essentially listen to the whole meeting.
Okay, all right, very well, thank you.
Sure.
If I could put in my plug, and I know he's going to tell me to be quiet.
That's a different agenda
That is
item.
why I am promoting to change our agenda order, with something that we're going to be talking about later on this afternoon.
I would hate to see us hold somebody over for a half a day because the theory somebody might want to call in from the public.
Yeah. Yes, yes. That's one reason why we're looking to.
We could fix
put-
it if that happened, I'm
Put
sure.
public comments up earlier in our agenda.
Through the chair, if I could.
No,
That's
yes.
what kind of spurred the question, because you had mentioned it in the briefing that I had, so I was just curious. We haven't implemented that yet. It looks like that's
I
maybe
think that's
coming.
a discussion that we're
Yeah.
going to have later on this afternoon.
Yeah, thank you.
And really, it's my understanding, just for the members and moving forward, we've always pretty much, we try to stick to the agenda because we do publish in advance and people know the schedule. And I assume people plan their schedule around that. But it does come up sometimes where you might have somebody, for whatever reasons, might have an emergency and needs to leave. And I think we should be flexible on that, but I haven't heard that today. So if people are comfortable, we'll just continue with the agenda. Yes. Ms. Stowers, I think you're
I'm
finished?
comfortable with that as well, sir.
Okay.
Moving forward, I don't know what's the next item?
Yeah.
Mr.
Are
Kenny?
we ready? Yes,
Or
okay,
is it-
yeah. Thank you, Ms. Renati. The next item on the agenda is K2, Executive Director's Report. K2A, Taxpayer Rights Advocate Annual Report. Presentation of the 2021-22 Taxpayer Rights Advocates Annual Report highlighting the office's accomplishments, taxpayer service improvements, and examples of cases illustrating services provided. Update on activities of the TRA office. This matter is being presented by Ms. Thompson.
Good morning, Chair Vasquez and honorable board members. I'm Lisa Thompson, Chief of the Taxpayer Rights Advocate Office, and I'm pleased to present to you the 2021-22 Taxpayer Rights Annual Report for property taxes and the alcoholic beverage tax. As part of my presentation, I will describe the contents of the TRA Annual Report and then provide an operational update as to the status of projects and activities of our office. The annual report is issued in accordance with the Morgan Taxpayer Bill of Rights under the provisions of Revenue and Taxation Code Section 5904. And the report highlights the TRA office's accomplishments, examples of cases illustrating the services that we provide to taxpayers, and issues that our office works on to resolve, and also describes our office's involvement in educational projects to help taxpayers. As part of the report, we include various statistics on completed cases that the TRA office worked on through the year. And it reports several pie charts identifying percentages, percentages for completed cases. It includes percentages for completed cases for each of the 4 board member districts, the percentage of completed cases for the valuation versus administrative category, as well as topics within those categories. For fiscal year 2021-22, our office completed work on 569 cases. All were in the area of property taxes. Of the completed cases, 25% were in District 1, Board Member Gaines's district. 32% were in District 2, Board Member Lieber's district. 19% were in District 3, Board Member Vasquez's district. And 24 from District 4, Board Member Schaefer's district. 75% of those cases were in the valuation category, which pertains to topics such as decline in value, changes in ownership, new construction, exclusions from reassessment, exemptions, assessment appeals, and general property taxation. 25% of the cases were in the administrative category, which includes topics such as creating and mailing of tax bills, refunds, and penalties. As to topic areas within the valuation categories, the report provides a breakdown into 8 different topic areas. The largest percentage of those cases involved exclusions from reassessment at 34%, followed by change in ownership at 18%, with exemptions at 10%. As to the topic area within the administrative court category, the report provides a breakdown into 6 topic areas. The largest percentage this year of cases involved delinquent or defaulted taxes at 37%, followed by access to data and other category at 25%, with the next highest percentage of special assessments at 16%. In addition to contacts from taxpayers that our office sets up as cases that we work on, our office also receives contacts from taxpayers that are seeking assistance in areas that don't pertain to our agency. In those cases, we assist the taxpayers by directing them to the appropriate state or county agency. The number of requestors that we directed elsewhere as a result of them contacting our office through our website, email intake form on our website were 72 this year. The TRA annual report also describes how the public becomes aware of our office and our services that we provide to taxpayers to assist them. One is through an agency publications that provides TRA office contact information, such as CDTFA Publication 145, which identifies our agency's TRA office as well as other state agencies' TRA offices and the IRS advocate. Our agency's website is also a resource for taxpayers where taxpayers become aware of the TRA office. At the bottom of every page on our agency's website, taxpayers can access the TRA office. County assessor's offices also refer taxpayers to our offices, as well as your board members' offices as also direct taxpayers to our office, or they forward information to us to assist them on your behalf. Other state agencies, taxpayer rights advocates also, such as Franchise Tax Board or the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration, also refer taxpayers to us if their area is in need for property taxes or the alcoholic beverage tax. Additionally, our office's communications department issues social media posts, so taxpayers are aware of the TRA office, and I thank Peter Kim for doing that on different platforms. Taxpayers can contact us by completing a web intake form that's available on our website, and they could also contact us by phone. The website intake form is very easy for taxpayers to use, provides all the needed contact information that we need, asks taxpayers to kind of describe the nature of their concern, so we can kind of prepare a little bit before we make the call to do a little bit of just research. The 2 primary functions of the TRA office are to ensure fair and equitable treatment for taxpayers in the assessment of collection of property taxes, and to recommend changes in policies, procedures, and laws to improve and ease taxpayer compliance. The annual report contains examples of cases our office works on to illustrate to taxpayers how their problems are resolved. Our role typically involves review and explanation of processes and laws, contact with county assessors or tax collectors' offices to help resolve the problem or concern that the taxpayer has with that local department. And oftentimes, a taxpayer just needs to have kind of assistance in understanding how they were treated and whether that complies with the law, so they receive confirmation of that. We are basically an independent party that that they can use for us to review the circumstances of their concerns to ensure that they were treated fairly according to the property tax law. There are several examples included in the annual report illustrating the types of cases received and how we assisted those taxpayers. In this year's annual report, we highlighted one transfer for persons age 55 and older, one involving a disabled veteran's exemption, and we also included a case concerning a parent-child exclusion. So before the statutory changes were made to base year value transfers and intergenerational exclusions resulting from the passage of Proposition 19, a constitutional amendment approved by the voters in November 2020, with implementing legislation signed into law by the governor in September of 2021. Our office annual report pointed out the impact of that amendment as part of our case examples. And so you will see those on two of those examples. Many of the cases that our office worked on during fiscal year 2021 to 22 involved exclusions from reassessment, specifically transfers between parents and children and base year value transfers for seniors. With respect to exclusions from between parents and children, the annual report highlighted an example of a transfer between a parent and child where a taxpayer had transferred 50% in a property to her son, with the transfer recorded on February 16th, 2021. The taxpayer contacted our office because they were concerned that the assessor's office asked them to complete Form BoE 19P instead of using the claim form they submitted seeking exemption under the law that was in effect before Proposition 19's intergenerational transfer provisions. Because it was a rental property, the taxpayers were concerned that completing an application on claim form for Proposition 19 would result in the denial of the exclusion. So we coordinated with the assessor's office, directing them to our agency's letter to assessor's guidance, addressing the one-day extension to perform an act due to the February 15th, 2021 state holiday, and that the notary date may be the evidence, may be considered evidence of the transfer date rather than the recording date. The assessor's office agreed and accepted the notary date and evaluated the claim for the parent-child transfer that the taxpayer made as they wanted. Upon closer review, the transaction, it turned out to be that the February 15th, 2021 transfer was not a change in ownership for property tax purposes, since the mother remained on title with the son, so the property wouldn't have been reassessed. Therefore, there was no exclusion to claim. We helped the taxpayer understand reassessment consequences if there were later transfers of interest in that property. With respect to the base year value transfers for seniors, we highlighted two examples. One for a base year value transfer for a property they purchased in the same county, and one where the replacement property was purchased in a different county. One case that I would like to highlight in this year's annual report what concerns the base year value transfer where the property was a duplex. The taxpayer was concerned about the amount of transfer. Our office helped the taxpayer understand that in the case of a multi-family or multi-dwelling property, each unit is considered to be a separate original property. So such that the base year value attributable to the unit that the original property was the taxpayer's primary residence is what transfers to the replacement residence. It's not both units. The unit of the duplex that was a separate residential unit that was rented out would not be part of the value that transfers to the replacement. Also, because the replacement was of higher value, our office explained that in determining the new taxable value of the replacement, the market value difference between the original and replacement would be added to the transferred factored base year value from the original to arrive at the new taxable value of the replacement residence. With respect to exemptions, the annual report also includes an example of a disabled veteran's exemption. A taxpayer who was a disabled veteran contacted our office seeking assistance with concerns about the amount of exemption he received. He felt the property tax bill excuse me, he received only included a partial exemption and was less than the amount he had received on his previous home. He also received 2 supplemental property tax bills shortly after the other bill that showed no exemption. He had also applied for a base year value transfer to that property. Our office reviewed the various property tax bills and then contact the assessor's office to obtain information about the assessment and the status of the claim for exemption, as well as the base year value transfer claim. After completing our analysis, we helped the taxpayer understand that the first bill he received was reflective of the January 1 lien date assessment prior to the time that he actually owned the property, and that the previous tenant or the previous owner had also been a disabled veteran, so was receiving that exemption. We also explained that the assessor's office expedited the processing of both claims, and both exemption and exclusion had been granted, with information transmitted to the county auditor's office to determine the effect on property taxes and issue refunds on those overpaid taxes. Because the assessor's office told us that they were unable to apply the full disabled veterans exemption, since the taxpayer only owned a portion of the new property, since he included his 2 daughters on title when he purchased that property, we helped the taxpayer understand that the exemption amount would only be up to 1/3 of the property's assessed value. We also helped him understand that simply removing his daughters from title would cause reassessment of 2/3 of the property, thereby losing the property tax base transferred from his previous home. So we do kind of look forward to let them know there could be consequences if you decide to, go different avenues. This year's annual report also identifies that the TRA office is involved in issue resolution as a result of certain contacts from taxpayers raised that contact our office, or that come before this board in contact with the annual Bill of Rights hearing. We become aware of issues that taxpayers or their representatives have, which develop into a project to resolve the issue that result in changes being implemented. This year's annual report identifies the solar energy new construction exclusion, which was initiated by our agency's property tax department, in part due to contacts made to the Taxpayer Rights Advocate Office by a taxpayer representative. The project was initiated to address issues that emerged since the release of the agency's guidelines for active solar energy new construction exclusion. And as part of that project, a proposed new property reporting form was distributed as a part 1 of the phases of that project. Work was suspended by the Property Tax Department on that project as a result of the passage of Proposition 19 and the substantial workload associated with that implementation. The next part of the Taxpayer Rights Advocate Annual Report contains a section on taxpayer service improvements. And that section has 4 parts. 1 is educating the public, 2, educating the public about Proposition 19, and 3, ease of access to information and forms review. As to educating the public, this section discusses the Taxpayer Rights Advocate Office role in taxpayer education through publication of information sheets. And for work that began in 2018 after discussions with the California Assessors Association concerning providing education, which were written in simple, non-technical terms for the issuance of such topics as various exemptions and exclusions. The annual report identifies the completion of 6 information sheets in fiscal year 2021-22, specifically from July 21 through June 2022. And they address exclusions from transfers between parents and children, transfers between grandparents and grandchildren, and base year value transfers for persons age 55 or over, and for disabled persons. The information sheets addresses transfers under current law of Proposition 19 with separate information sheets addressing transfers occurring under prior law, since taxpayers may still be applying for such transfers, and county assessors are still processing those transfers. The information sheets are clear on what period they apply to, so the taxpayer will know which apply to current law versus prior law based on the transfer dates. The TRA annual report also identifies 2 other information sheets that were drafted during fiscal year 2021, but posted in August 2022, shortly after the end of the fiscal year. They were on the base year value transfers for disabled persons, similar to other information sheets. 2 were issued as a set, 1 to address current law, Proposition 19, and 1 for prior law. The Taxpayer Rights Advocate Office is committed to making improvements to taxpayer education and also to provide information in simple, non-technical terms that they are able to understand. Our office values the importance of having information sheets available as a resource to taxpayers that they can read about the main requirements, the specific purpose of law, how they can apply for the exemption or exclusion, and also provide helpful hints about that topic. I will also be discussing recent work with our information sheets as the second part of my presentation and future updates. The second part of the taxpayer service improvement is on educating the public about Proposition 19. It addresses publication of a Proposition 19 fact sheet in collaboration with our agency's communications officer, Mr. Peter Kim, as part of the Proposition 19 implementation and action plan for education and outreach. The fact sheet was first published in February 2021 and then updated in April 2022 following the passage of implementing legislation for Proposition 19 and issuance of our agency's guidance on that implementing legislation. The fact sheet was issued to provide taxpayers with simple, straightforward information concerning Proposition 19 designed with the taxpayer specifically in mind. The fact sheet provides information on the requirements, its benefits, and situational examples of how Proposition 19 works and how to apply for it. The third part of the taxpayer service improvement section is on ease of access to information. This area discusses the TRA office's commitment to ensuring the public has access to information when they need it. And we do this through examining our agency's website with the taxpayer in mind, and then we coordinate with our agency's property tax department and communications officer to update information on the website to ensure sufficient information is available on various topics and can be easily accessed. As described in the annual report, our agency developed a webpage dedicated to Proposition 19 through the constitutional amendment that was passed, and we continued to post information through the end of this year's fiscal report, and it continued on beyond this year's annual report. During the time period of the TRA annual report, 8 LTAs were issued concerning Proposition 19, and the 2021 TRA annual report indicates our office reviewed material issued by our agencies through this fiscal year and believe our agency was proactive and timely in posting information concerning Proposition 19 and various aspects of its implementation. The fourth part of the taxpayer service improvement section is on forms review. This area discusses the TRA office's role in periodically reviewing property statements and other property tax reporting forms prescribed by our agency to determine if forms and instruction promote or discourage taxpayer compliance. This is done as part of the responsibilities under the Mortgage Property Taxpayer Bill of Rights, specifically Section 5906 of Revenue and Taxation Code. As a result of working with taxpayers, the TRA office becomes aware of changes that are needed to a form, either the form itself or to instructions of a form. The 2021-22 report indicates that following the passage of Senate Bill 539, which implemented the provisions of Proposition 19, the our agency, in consultation with the California Assessors Association, revised 9 board-prescribed forms to make them consistent with the provisions of Revenue and Taxation Code Section 63.2 and 69.9. Our office reviewed these forms during the revision process and provided suggested changes. The forms were adopted by our elected board members at the board meeting held on May 24th, 2022, followed by the forms being distributed to assessors in early July via letter to assessors. The Taxpayer Rights Advocate Office believes the forms have been revised to accurately reflect property tax law that benefits California taxpayers in that they are user-friendly. The last part of the annual report are the appendixes, and those include the Morgan Property Taxpayer Bill of Rights provisions that pertain to property taxes, and Appendix 2 contains the California Taxpayer Bill of Rights provision specific to the alcoholic beverage tax. This TRA annual report is posted to our website and can be accessed under the Taxpayer Rights Advocate area. In accordance with the Morgan Taxpayer Bill of Rights, this annual report will provide the basis for the upcoming Taxpayer Bill of Rights hearing that will be held in August of this year. We, with respect to the alcoholic beverage tax, Section 32463 provides that the board shall conduct an annual hearing where industry representatives and individual taxpayers may present their proposals on changes to the alcoholic beverage tax, which may further improve voluntary compliance and relationship between taxpayers and the government. With respect to the Morgan Property Taxpayer Bill of Rights, the annual report, the Revenue and Taxation Code section, which provides that the annual hearing will take place, is Revenue and Taxation 5906. And it states that the board shall conduct a public hearing soliciting input from assessors, other local agency representatives, and taxpayers to address the advocate's annual report and to identify a means to correct any problems identified in that report. So, in advance of the Taxpayer Bill of Rights hearing, we will be working with the communications officer to provide various outreach efforts to make the public aware of the hearing. We also coordinate with assessors' offices and tax collector's office, on various means. So as that happens, I will update the board members on that as part of my my monthly updates. The generally, I had indicated the August is traditionally when the Bill of Rights hearing is. Of course, the TRA office will confirm the specific date and time of the Taxpayer Bill of Rights hearing with our agency's executive director, Ms. Yvette Stowers, and also board chair, Mr. Anthony Vasquez. Again, however, historically it is in August, and prior to that, a letter to assessors will be distributing in that. So what is important to keep in mind is that we work with taxpayers throughout the year to resolve their problems. So many issues have already been resolved before the annual Bill of Rights hearing. But at the hearing, taxpayers, industry representatives, and other parties can comment on areas of that in that annual report. They can also comment on items that our office may be working with them on, or any areas of concern regarding property taxes or other programs we administer, and in that regard. So before moving on to my next part of the update is, I just would like to take this opportunity to thank my staff in the TRA office for all of their work that they do throughout the year. We are only successful due to their hard work and dedication, and I really appreciate their service and their contributions that they make to public service. So that concludes my presentation of the TRA office annual report. I'm available to answer any questions, or I can wait until my next presentation.
I have a question.
Yes, we have a question here for Member Schaefer.
Yes, Ms. Thompson, I've grown up in a world of phone books that always had attractive covers, and there was always some indication what the picture was about. I don't recognize 3 of these 4 pictures here. Being a Berkeley grad, I of course recognize the UC campus, but could you tell me what we're looking at number 1, 3, and 4 here?
So what we do is, so we actually let the CDTFA forms and publication sections be creative in their choice of pictures. I've always liked their pictures. The suggestion that I make, or I guess a criteria, is that we have 1 picture from each of the districts. And so that is all of them. Last year, I think it was more of a little beach theme. But yeah,
Number
so
one,
I don't know if
think,
that's the
might be
library.
the,
Do you know?
Placer County Courthouse.
Here, is it the state
I
library?
think.
Is it the library?
Oh, is it?
Auburn. It looks like it.
It's the library.
What is the city hall that's in 4th? That's a very attractive building.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll have to get back to you, but
Could that be San Diego?
it's in each of your districts, so you don't recognize them?
I recognize one of them.
So I'm happy to look into it, but I
That's City
can't tell you.
Hall. This is City Hall.
Well, it says City Hall, but I don't know where. Well, I'd like Mr. Kim whenever
I
they-
tell you what, I'll have each of you guess of what it is, and you can email me, and then I'll look, and I'll find out exactly what they are.
I would like
and-
to know that any publication we put out that has a photograph in it, that there's information what we're looking at.
Oh, sure, I'll try to do that.
She will look into it, but
Yeah.
these are standard pictures that all state agencies are using. But she will respond.
Yeah,
We will give
I
you a
will.
response, but
I'm happy to
it's
do
a
that.
great coverage.
It's a great cover, isn't it?
Well, I appreciate the UC
And
Berkeley
what about the
campus
pie
picture.
charts? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah,
The information is outstanding. Thank you, Ms. Thompson.
thank you. I'll work on pictures next time.
Can I comment?
Yes, Member Gaines.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ms. Thompson. The report is beautiful. I had a chance to look through it. It's
Thank you, Mr.
really
Ryan.
nicely laid out, a lot of good information. Very helpful, and thank you for the breakdown also on a per-district basis in terms of the number of cases that you've dealt with individually. And I don't know if this is the appropriate report for it, but it'd be nice, and we talk about it in our hearings, in terms of how many hits are we getting on the website. And I know that we've talked about the number of hits for Prop 19, but it would be nice to have that for at least for me. It would be nice to see how many hits per year in reference to Prop 19, and then separate from that, how many hits are we getting on our website for any other question that's related to the BoE, and just monitor that from year to year so that we know, hopefully that gives us some indication of, how many people are making the inquiries. And I think the website is good. It's been revamped, so it seems to me that it's pretty easy to use. But that's something that I think would be helpful. I don't know if it goes here or not, but I'm just throwing it out there.
Duly noted, basically data analytics on people who would come into our website. Is it just general information? Is it TRA information? Is it Prop 19 information?
Right.
Is it career opportunities?
Yeah.
Not a techie, but I'm sure we can track that
I'll let
information.
you figure it out where to put it, but
Yeah.
I just think that would be helpful. The report is very thorough, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
We will look into how we could gather that data and report out to you, report out to the entire board
Right.
on, let's say, every 6 months. I think 6 months is better than quarterly.
That's great. Thank you, Lisa. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Lieber.
Thank you. Well, as a Stanford alum, I have to say that Stanford has a very attractive tower as well. It would look fantastic
Okay,
on a
let me just write
report.
this down. Stanford Tower, okay.
And although I do recognize that, Berkeley is within our state government, so that's probably why it took pride of place there on the top. But I have to say that the TRA office and process, to me, is one of the most important things that we have going. And I think especially over the last several years, our constituents are not necessarily as into property tax land as we all are here at this meeting, and are really hard pressed, just living daily life in California. And You know, and the examples that you gave, the one of the veteran who had his daughter on the, daughters on the title and things, and I hope that we can really amp up the exposure of those kinds of issues that are irreversible for folks, and maybe that works into our web search engine optimization, if that's still used, and kind of pointing people who are looking at buying a home in California to understand those kinds of things that are not very reversible like that. And then my kudos on all the information sheets. Those are incredibly important for folks in the community and in accessing that. And I'm definitely going to be working to keep the District 2 numbers very strong in terms of the number of cases coming in, and I know that you and your staff do a great job in closing them, and really offering that as a resource to people in the community, because I think that in a large part, people base their decisions on their own life needs and may not be thinking about the downstream impacts. And in most of our districts, with a housing shortage, it's also what's available. And there's a lot of pressure on folks when they're at that point of moving their home. So I'll be definitely putting that out to my constituents, and very much appreciate what I heard about the exchanges back and forth with the assessors and getting the information from them and offering the information about what's happening with the cases to them, especially in the rural counties who may not receive every one-off kind of a case. I think that information exchange is incredibly important. So thank you so much for detailing that.
Thank you.
Deputy Controller, yes.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson, for your excellent report. Thought it was very comprehensive and detailed, and you're doing some incredibly important work in this area. I want to applaud you and your team for your efforts in finding resolutions in what are often complex property tax matters. I just had a few questions in terms of like the communication and outreach efforts. Oftentimes, the TRA is the first point of contact for a taxpayer when they're reaching out to the Board of Equalization. So do you believe that there should be some type of media blitz or publicity campaign to inform the public about the services available through the TRA?
Yeah, and we do that. So, I mean, our communications officer, we're very involved, or I'm involved with him as far as outreach kind of efforts. We, notify advisory council members, stakeholders. He just actually had a social media post about the TRA annual report, as well as the information sheet that was just published. That'll be part of my second report, so I won't tell you what it is. But but it was just posted on different social media platforms. So he does do that regularly.
That's great.
May I say something? Because I appreciate you saying that the TRA is often the first point of contact, but in reality, it's you board members. Your constituents are reaching out to you with their concerns as they relate to property tax. So they contact you, your office do their best to resolve, and then you funnel it to the TRA, because you are our ambassadors.
Yeah. And we appreciate you forwarding taxpayers to us, and we enjoy helping them.
Could I
Find it very
interject?
fulfilling.
There's a couple other questions. You finished, Deputy?
I have a few more questions, but please, Senator.
I'm sorry,
I just-
Deputy Controller.
Just on that,
You want to do a
just on
follow-up,
that
though?
subject,
Go
yeah,
ahead,
because
go ahead. Member Gaines.
I think it is incumbent on us as the elected members of the board to make sure that we're communicating with our constituents,
Yeah.
whether that's at a Rotary Club or any sort of public function where we have an opportunity to talk about, what is the BoE, what do we do, and how can we help you? So I think you're right. It's really on us, and then we've got constituent service person or persons, depending on how your office is set up, in order to help those constituents out. And then sometimes they get directed to the taxpayer rights advocate, too. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Deputy Controller.
I appreciate that, Chairman. In In regards to my second question, just the relationship the TRA has with county assessors. What does the outreach look like? And for example, we all praise this annual report. I was wondering if each county assessor office is also getting a copy of this report?
They don't get hard copies of the report, so we post it to our website, so they are aware of it. What we do is, in advance of the Taxpayer Bill of Rights hearing, we distribute posters and flyers to all 58 assessors' offices, as well as tax collectors and clerks of the board. And they post those flyers and maintain copies of the poster, of the little flyers for taxpayers to have in their offices. So we traditionally do that early June, maybe, I think early June. So, and they distribute them. So they also kind of advertise and make the public aware of those annual report, the availability. So the posters will actually identify the annual report. And then also, what we do is we communicate with assessors throughout the year by my attendance at the California Assessors Association and their regional conferences every year. So unless there's some unusual reason that I am not able to attend, that I do attend those meetings. So I also communicate with them as part of my update at a conference. I would advise them of any information sheets that we issued through the year, and just to kind of give them an update, although they're aware of it anyway because we issue them via letters to assessors. So, so we do communicate with, I communicate with them, not just my staff and myself when we're, interacting with their own staffs in resolving a taxpayer problem. I also work with them on outreach efforts as far as to keep them informed about like the Bill of Rights hearing and the availability of their taxpayers to come, and they help us advertise it. Absolutely. Many assessors actually have links to, on their website, to the Taxpayer Rights Advocate Office, our BoE agency website.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson, for that detailed answer. Kind of goes to my next question. Is the TRA using opportunities to present at California assessor conferences or other types of tax gatherings on this, the cases that you're handling, the resolutions, and kind of all the details?
I don't go
here and
over so
after?
much of the cases at their report. So like, as part of the Assessors Association, they have committee meetings, on a legislative committee and then standards committee. So traditionally, then I would present like at, not every meeting, but like if I have something to discuss as far as updates for the information sheets, then I would identify that to them. They might also bring it up under education. It's kind of a little bit different. But ultimately, I mean, that is why we started these information sheets. Just after I took the position of the advocate for this agency, I discussed an idea I had about providing information sheets. I think we called them fact sheets at that point, but they've kind of changed into information sheets. But because they do think it's beneficial to have that for taxpayers. And that's part of one of the Taxpayer Bill of Rights statutes, that we can assist assessors in their efforts to educate taxpayers. And that's kind of why this started, and we've continued that. We just started with, exclusions and exemptions. And we did that shortly after that when we discussed it in 2018, and then along came Proposition 19, and it affected all of our existing information sheets. So we had to go back to the drawing board and do it again. So we do plan on having more information sheets that we work and collaborate with assessors to make sure we are going in the right direction.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. I do appreciate you utilizing your time and heading out to those conferences and being on the road and speaking with assessors and taxpayers about the issues that are facing the BoE and just taxpayers in general. My very last question is in regards to property tax deadlines and how the TRA is leveraging channels of communication, specifically like social media, to let the public know about property tax deadlines coming up or those that may have passed, and maybe other forms of communication that you can speak of.
That wouldn't really be our area, but but I know that at the property tax department, issues a calendar, so I'm not sure about the various social media posts in that regard.
Since it's actually payment of property taxes outside of BOE scope, but our communication officer does an excellent job of having little gentle reminders out there for all tax deadlines, property tax deadlines, most importantly.
I appreciate that.
yeah.
The controller's office just extended the deadline for unclaimed property. So I would be happy to work with the BOE and kind of
Yeah, we
getting that
have
message
not
out.
been, I'm sorry to cut you off, sir. Go ahead.
Please, go ahead.
We have not traditionally tracked or communicated about unclaimed property because it's not, it's going to sound weird.
It's not our jurisdiction, but yeah.
But we do follow your site when it comes to property tax postponement. But we could look into how we can share your information on unclaimed property. Let me look into it and
Yeah, property
See-
tax postponement, unclaimed property, just anything that has to do with property tax or property in general. I understand it's a little bit of a dicey area
it's
for
a
you,
little
but
dicey area, but
I'm
we'll look into it,
just saying in terms of
Property tax
communication.
postponement deals with real property. Unclaimed property could be cash, checks, bank accounts, stocks, bonds. So that's why it's a little different, but more than happy to work in partnership with the State Controller's Office to communicate your programs.
I mean, I think that'd be great, just in terms of a taxpayer reaching out and getting all the information they need rather than being put in the ringer. And I appreciate that, Ms. Thompson. Thank you for your report.
Thank you.
Member Schaefer.
Thank you, Chair. I have a very short list of questions. In fact, it's just one. I see that you cleared 32% of the cases in Member Lieber's district, and she's very proud of that. You've only cleared 24% in Member Schaefer's district. I'm really more concerned about the 76% that you have not cleared. I just wondered when these will be cleared, what happens, how I can speed it up. I have an opening in my office. I'll hire somebody to work with you on this if we can get my clearance rate up to, I'd like to be at 90%.
Oh,
How can you help me do a better job? Or I help you do a better job?
okay. I think, well, the percentage is by board member district. That just means like, so of the total number of cases that we completed, it's like 100%. And so we allocated them to each of the district based on the counties that they, that it dealt with. That's what that means. So we're done with 100% of your case that we
Oh, you
completed
are?
last
Well,
year.
that's very good.
Absolutely.
All right, well, then I join member.
And everyone's.
I join member
Absolutely.
Lieber in commending you on that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Did you have a second
I
part?
do.
Well, before she goes, I was just reminded by legal that we do promote the unclaimed property on the BOE's website.
I'm very happy to hear that. Thank you.
And we will, if there's any changes in law, I think there has been, we will work with you to see what we can do to make sure that the public is aware of that extremely valuable resource.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Moving forward, Ms. Thompson, if we can summarize that, because I'm looking at these hungry bodies on my left here.
Yeah, I have a shortened version of this
Okay.
one. It's not my
Our
standard
lunch
update.
started 3 minutes ago.
So,
Go ahead.
So for members, at this time, I'd like to provide you with an update on the activities of the TRA office to keep you informed. First, I'm pleased to report some statistics on the number of taxpayer cases completed by the TRA office last month, which is reported in the memorandum, which is attached to the PAN. In January 2023, we completed 36 cases. 5 were in Member Gaines District, District 1, 9 Member Lieber's District, District 2, 8 in Board Member Vasquez's District, District 3, and 14 in Member Schaefer's District, District 4. Of the 36 cases, 8 were in the administrative category and 28 in the valuation category. I'll not describe what the categories are, so. With respect to the administrative category, and it's 8 in total, 2 pertain to access to data, 2 pertain to delinquent or defaulted taxes, 1 involved penalties, and 3 other issues. With respect to the valuation category, and it's 8 in total, 2 pertain to the actual enrollment of values, 1 involved appraisal methodology, 3 cases involved change in ownership, 16 involved exclusions from reassessment, 5 involved exemptions, and 1 involved new construction. To provide a further breakdown of those exclusion and exemption topics, with respect to the 16 cases involving exclusions from reassessment, 9 pertain to the parent-child exclusion, 6 pertain to base year value transfers for persons age 55 and over, and 1 pertain to base year value transfers for disabled persons. One of the 9 cases involved the parent-child exclusion occurred during the time of current law of Proposition 19, and 8 pertain to prior law. 4 of the 7 cases for base year value transfers occurred during current law of Proposition 19, and the remaining 3 cases pertain to transfers occurred under prior law. For the 5 exemption cases, 1 pertained to disabled veterans exemption, 1 homeowners exemption, and 3 the welfare exemption. As to taxpayer education, I'm pleased to inform you that our office has issued a new information sheet. It was posted earlier this week. And the information sheet covers various property tax assistance programs to seniors in the areas of exemptions from a property's assessed value, the property tax postponement program offered through the State Controller's Office, payment plans for outstanding property taxes that a taxpayer can enter into with the County Tax Collector's Office, and also the transfer of a factored base year value to a replacement property. The information sheet also provides general information on California property taxation and directs taxpayers to our agency's publication 29 on a California property tax and overview. We believe this information sheet will be helpful for many taxpayers, and it is posted to our website under the TRA office, under the taxpayer education section. There are now a total of 8 information sheets. So at future board meetings, I'll provide you with an update to keep you informed, and this includes my update on the activities of the TRA office.
Thank you. Seeing no hands, I think, does this conclude?
That's
your
it.
It concludes. Ms. Chiquetti, we don't need to go out to the public on this one, do
We do not. This is just her report.
And I'm just looking at the time, so it looks like we're right up to our lunch hour, or break, right?
And, Chair, if there's anybody out in the audience who wants a copy of this, do you have some for them?
I have a few if somebody would like it.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, I noticed on our schedule, I had it down for 60 minutes. Do we need the 60, or is it 45 sufficient?
Sir, we need the 60.
Oh, we need, okay, I guess there's things
Chairman.
going on.
I had the controller's schedule blocked out for the vote on the F item from,
At what time?
she had a 30-minute block, 1 to 1:30. I'll be happy to reach out to her, see if maybe she can push it to the tail end of that.
That'd be perfect, Mr. Amron. I have staff here who's been here since 7 a.m., so they really need to get their 30-minute lunch.
I mean, at least 1:30, would that be okay?
1:30 is fine. It's 12:30 now, 12:35?
12:37, yeah.
Could I ask Ms. Stars why we need 1 hour for lunch?
I have staff here who's been working since 7 a.m., and they need to have lunch. They don't have the privilege of having someone pick up their lunch for them. It takes
see.
time.
So they got to get out.
We've been working since 6:30 this morning. You know that.
I know. But we're on 24/7 clock, so that's okay.
Well, I.
No, I'm sensitive, that's
I sent
fine.
him some emails at 6:30 this morning, and he responded 6:31.
You guys are different. You don't.
So 1:30 would be sufficient?
I think that would be.
Yeah, I think we can work with 1:30. If we could
Lunch break
recess
until
now, I'm sure they're ready for a break.
I know it.
And we have lunch plans, ladies and gentlemen.
All righty, so we'll recess now, and we'll reconvene at 1:30.
1:30.
Thank you.